So by special request, I had someone request scenarioing out a limited nuclear war or attack between Russia and the United States. And so I put something quickly together, and it's something that's going to start with an escalation. It's going to involve some strikes against military targets, and it'll carry over into a strike against each respective city. And then at that point, negotiations, loss of life would already be so high, they're going to pull back. At no point are ICBM silos going off. So these are going to be limited strikes with the Russian side mobile launchers, on the US side a stealth bomber, and then it's going to involve some cruise missile strikes with the Russian sub, and then a limited salvo for strategic subs on both sides. And so, as we see this escalation, different paths, there's some people believe there's no such thing as a limited nuclear war, but obviously there is. There's all sorts of possibilities, from one off strike all the way up to, basic, strategic, all out, mutually assured destruction. There's a very broad range between those two things, and this will look at what would the casualties look like if once we cross into striking a city respectively on each side, what could we potentially see? So I'm going to kind of run through the scenario I put together, and it's going to start, and it's going to be on a highly implausible at this time, but let's just go off this because, again, it's for Russia and the United States to see something that could potentially spark off. Let's say there's a negotiated ceasefire in Ukraine, and part of the negotiated ceasefire would be security guarantee. Russia breaks that security guarantee. The United States deploys an armored brigade combat team to Ukraine. It starts advancing to drive back Russian forces. It starts to stage right around here. And so Russia's going to do a very limited nuclear strike, attacking their staging location and also two key city locations here in Kiev. So this is both military and somewhat symbolic attack. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and execute this plan. So let's go ahead and take this off. We're going to see these launch. So an armored brigade combat team, U.S. strength, depending on, how much of it was deployed, you could be looking anywhere, say 5,000, just total high level, pulled out of my anus number. So let's say 5,000, be looking at potentially, over 80 Abrams, over 150 Bradleys, potentially lost at that point. I'm going to stop and run a casualty check at each kind of stopping point. So at this point, for Ukrainian casualties, 567,000. This isn't going to model military units that aren't there, but let's just say another, say 4,000. Say not everyone's there. Not everyone's going to get destroyed in it, but so let's say 4,000 Americans lose their life. Say kind of like a Pearl Harbor. The U.S. decides that we're going to, using a B-2 stealth bomber, we're going to strike with nuclear weapons the launch sites. And this is going to be not just a strategic kind of thing, but also symbolic. Hey, you hit us and we're hitting you back now. Let's go. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. We see the little B-2 bomber there come in. Boom, boom, boom. So, struck these sites. Unfortunately, this is going to model Ukrainian casualties again. and that's going to be reality. I mean, you know, they could say Russian citizens. Not too bad though, because it didn't hit highly populated areas, so not a lot of casualties beyond what we initially saw. Russia then decides, because this flew out of a joint U.S. and United Kingdom air base, they are now going to strike with some nuclear-tipped cruise missiles against 2 joint U.S. British air bases. Around a casualty again. So now you have over 100,000 British losses, representing 0.2% of their population. There'd be additional military losses. Off the top of my head, I couldn't begin to guess U.S. deployment numbers, especially in a time of escalation at that. Let's say add another 5,000. Just, again, completely just making this up at this point. Let's say another 5,000, so 10,000 American losses. So now a decision is made utilizing a Ohio-class sub. They have one of those new 6-kiloton warheads, a very limited nuclear warhead. They're going to strike a Russian base at this point. And again, this is, hey, you hit us, and we're hitting you. Happen. Did I miss it? No. It's almost like I see a triangle. All right, let's try this again. Target. Not sure what's going on there. Oh, crap. Not that one. I need this one. Target. Now we'll just go with this instead. I don't know why. You know what happened? I accidentally moved the sub, and the sub is right there. Sometimes these simulators can be eventful. All right. Make sure I turn off set location. And now, done. Apologize for that. Okay, so now it's firing off. It's going to come in. It's going to hit this Russian base. Okay. So now we're going to see 94,000 Russian losses. So right now we're already getting into this over 500,000, well over 500,000. Now, back to my attack plans. Russia is going to decide, sorry, let's take this off. Russian military base, they're going to strike using one of their ballistic missile subs against Virginia Beach. home to the East Coast SEAL teams, also DevGru, among many other things. So now it's firing. That could represent a serious degradation of our naval assets. See right there, United States, 75,000. And again, these are military targets so far. The U.S. is going to respond with a strike on their ballistic missile main naval base. So, let's go ahead and do that bad boy. This one recently got hit with a tsunami, and so there's some question about what impact it could have had on their strategic nuclear subforce. And between that and the drone attack on their strategic bombers, we could have seen some level of Russian, their nuclear forces impaired. Still, not to say there's still plenty of, weapons and weapon systems. So Russia's going to respond to this with a strike on Boston. This is going to be somewhat even symbolic. Key part of the United States history, United States founding, Boston Tea Party. Let's go ahead and stop right there. Let's go ahead and run casualties. I didn't run it after the Russian naval base because it's not going to model a lot of casualties on that. So the United States has now grown up to 774,000. Now, the United States is going to make a symbolic attack on their own against a population center in Russia against St. Petersburg. So let's take a quick look. So at this point, Russia's now climbed to 1.3 million losses. United States, 774,000, plus the loss of military units overseas, Ukrainians, British, and those are initial losses. We'll have more longer-term cancer fatalities, 2.8 million losses, 128,000 square kilometers. A serious impact, but a limited nuclear exchange. At this point, negotiations take place. There's going to be a lot of harsh language, but cooler heads, use that term loosely, cooler heads prevail. Once cities start getting targeted, you see the overall destruction. Even leaders, whether you can have whatever opinion of Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump, but anybody seeing a devastation like that is obviously going to affect their psyche. And they decide that at this point, they have to back off. They've each hit cities. They've each hit some military locations against each other. And they decide at this point it's not worth it. Now, I know some people are going to say, hey, this has been wargamed out multiple times, and every time it leads to mutually assured destruction. Well, I can tell you something. It's a lot different doing a war game when you know there's no serious consequences to say, yes, we want to use nuclear weapons. Yes, we want to do this in a war game versus in real life when you know that when you make that decision, you're talking about millions of people dying, possibly. So to say that no matter what, it's going to lead to the end of the world, even an all exchange won't lead to the end of the world, but that it's going to lead to mutually assured destruction. No, you have to plan for different eventualities. And I'm not advocating that a limited nuclear war is a good thing. I have said many times nuclear weapons must not be used. We must return back to the mindset into the 80s of reducing nuclear stockpiles. We're moving in the opposite direction now, which is not a good thing. So I don't want anyone commenting and say, whatever. But this is a very plausible possibility of exchanges hitting some military locations, possibly escalating to a city. I think there was even a movie about this at one point in the 60s where a Russian city was hit and the U.S. agreed to allow one of their own cities to be hit in retaliation. Not to say a movie is supposed to represent, a realistic scenario, but this is just one possibility. very real, could happen, especially with the mindsets going on right now. The hope would be that if we ever cross that threshold, that there would be some level of cooler heads once the casualties start racking up. And it is possible. There's no guarantee that it would continue to up the escalation ladder. Now, there is a possibility. I always say when you start hitting the other side's silos, stuff like that, targeting them, it's possible. Anything's possible, right? But I think that the idea that a limited nuclear war can't happen, yes, it absolutely can happen. Yes, a nuclear war can be winnable under certain circumstances. It would have to involve proper battlefield use and escalation management. It's very difficult. It's such a gamble, though, that, it's not worthwhile for anyone to try to go down that avenue, even if you have to do some level of wargaming and simulation as a possibility, right? You always have to plan for different eventualities. That's why people get alarmed when someone say, "Hey, United States has plans to nuke Canada." Well, countries constantly wargame and plan out different scenarios. Does that mean no matter what any rhetoric says, the United States is not invading Canada, it's not going to attack Canada, any crap like that? So it's useful for headlines, and some people, sometimes world leaders say stupid things to grab headlines. But actions speak louder than words, and clearly there's no massing of U.S. troops on the border. I mean, I had to laugh at all of that stuff. And I get with Canadians why you'd be upset with it. I understand. Anyways, let's get into a tangent. I don't like to even go down that route on my videos. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope it's eye-opening. Command Modern Operations, which my last few videos, you didn't see it, check it out. I've done so much testing against different U.S. armored divisions, getting struck with nuclear weapons, representing different types of limited strikes. I was using Command to model ballistic missile defenses in this scenario. The problem is I had so many units going on, it just turned into a nightmare. Things were going off and constantly boom, 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 boom. And I couldn't take it anymore. I just kept clicking the button and clicking the button. I was out of control. I have to be honest with you. I had way too many satellites, way too many units, and I went off the deep end. I'm going to put out a video about it, and because it's very interesting, but I just couldn't put it into this one. It ended up being 40 minutes, and most people are only going to watch probably 3 minutes. They're going to turn this on and be like, "What are you doing, man?" But for you guys that are out there that do stick with you to the end, you guys are the best. So totally appreciate you. Hope everyone enjoyed. If you haven't, subscribe to the channel. Leave me a like, leave me a comment. Helps to motivate me. Put in requests. This came in from a request from a gentleman who's wanting to write a book about the aftermath of a limited nuclear war. I think it's a tremendous idea. I had my own idea for that. You're going to beat me to it. But in the comments, I'd love to tell you what my idea was. And maybe you might be able to get an idea or two from it. So thanks, everybody. Have a good one.